After the fall of France in 1940, there are two Frances. There's the France that is directly occupied by the Germans, including Paris, and there is a puppet regime with its capital at Vichy. So resistance groups form in each one.
From the start, the inspiration for French resistance to Germany was embodied by one man, a veteran of the Great War, General Charles de Gaulle.
Charles de Gaulle fought all the way through the German invasion of France in 1940.
Rather than surrender to the Germans, rather than go along with the French government, he arrives in Britain by himself and just says, by the way, I'm now the leader of the Free French. He's self-appointed. Churchill goes, yeah, you might be useful. He gives him an office, gives him a radio, lets him do some broadcasts.
Que l'honneur des Français consiste à continuer la guerre aux côtés de leurs alliés.
He's going to announce the Vichy government is illegitimate. Anybody who's in France should come over to England, and we're going to start to put together an army that's going to liberate ourselves. If you can't get here, you should start resisting while you're there.
This was an extremely important event in galvanizing the French people. Up to that point, they'd been in a state of despondency at the rapid defeat at the hands of the Germans. Now here was a voice, one of their own, offering them hope. He says, the flame of French resistance must not be extinguished and will not be extinguished. These are words that French men and women were longing to hear. It's not only the beginning of the resistance, it's the beginning of the rise of Charles de Gaulle to political power in France.
The night before D-Day, dozens of Allied agents are dropped behind German lines to coordinate with groups of the French resistance, so-called Jedburgh teams.
Three-man teams who parachute into occupied France, an American, a British, and a French agent.
They bring weapons with them, they bring a radio set so they could communicate.
They coordinate activities, and they inform the groups what the Allies are up to. The Jedburghs have an ultimate goal, and that is to ease the invasion planned for June 1944. Once the Allies land in June 6th, the resistance becomes emboldened.
On July 25th, the Americans launch a massive air and ground attack, Operation Cobra. After a month and a half of combat among the hedgerows of Normandy, the Allies now break through the German defensive perimeter.
Paris is the center of the German occupying force, but the Allies were not super interested in Paris.
Cities are an enormous military problem. Do you go into Paris knowing that you could end up fighting an urban battle that you don't want to fight? The streets narrow your ability to maneuver, so fighting inside a city is nobody's idea of what you want to do. Of course, if you're French, the situation is completely different.
The French people are thinking that the Allies are just a few hundred kilometers from the city of Paris, and they believed that Paris would be next in the great capitals of Europe to be liberated from Nazi fascism.
To the French, Paris is not just the capital of France, it is the most important, most symbolic city that you're going to liberate. And the man who thinks he's going to take control of all of this is Charles de Gaulle.
Throughout the war, he builds up Free French forces in London and in Africa. French soldiers flock to his colors. And by D-Day, he has something of a Free French armed force. And de Gaulle is astonished and appalled to hear that the Allies are not focusing on Paris as a key objective. Paris is like the beating heart of the French Republic. There is no France without Paris. And de Gaulle said, if you're not going, I'm going.
Allied forces advance across France to force the Wehrmacht's retreat to the Rhine and beyond. Liberating Paris from German occupation is not their main strategic concern, but Parisians have other ideas.
The problem for Paris is that when the Normandy invasion happens, it cuts the city off from its principal food supply. And the Germans are trying to take everything that they can out of the city. So it's a very, very unstable, very insecure place.
And so there is the beginnings of popular uprising in Paris. A lot of that is being driven by the communist resistance. De Gaulle is quite keen to get to Paris because what he doesn't want is Paris to become liberated by the communist resistance. He does not want to liberate France only for it to fall into the hands of communism.
To ensure that French troops liberate Paris, General de Gaulle requires the support of the Supreme Allied Commander, General Dwight Eisenhower.
De Gaulle didn't have that many cards to play in 1944, but he played them as skillfully as anybody. There is a French unit, the 2nd Armored Division, controlled by General Philippe Leclerc, that has been disobeying American orders to get closer and closer and closer to the city so that it could go into Paris if it had to.
And so de Gaulle became very aggressive about steering the 2nd Armored Division toward the city. He gave General Leclerc specific instructions to, no matter what these Americans tell you, I need you to get to Paris.
As Winston Churchill would say, he tends to love to bite the hand that feeds him. You have to give him credit, though, for he has his eye on one thing, and that's a free France.
August 1944. The Germans are in full retreat across France. They begin to evacuate Paris. Parisians sense a chance to recapture their city. But they need a spark.
On the 15th of August, the Parisian police, which was 20,000 strong and had been collaborating with the Germans up to that moment, actually switches sides and raises the flag on their building, giving the sign to the rest of the city and, of course, to the partisans that this was the moment the uprising needed to start. And so the streets of Paris become a battlefield. The French resistance has been preparing for this moment for a very long time. And they act against the Germans quite rapidly and quite successfully.
As this happened, Charles de Gaulle shows up to Supreme Allied Commander Eisenhower's headquarters and go, we have to march on Paris.
The Allies don't particularly like de Gaulle, but see de Gaulle as a bulwark against communism.
And Eisenhower was smart enough to know that it would look really, really good if the first troops to enter Paris were the Free French.
Eisenhower decides to allow the Free French forces to send one division into the city and to help the insurgents to free the city.
Supported by the American 4th Division, General de Gaulle orders the French 2nd Armored Division into Paris.
Toward the bitter end, Adolf Hitler issues instructions to General von Choltitz, who was in control of Paris, to destroy the city. Hitler, during a phone call with von Choltitz, asks, is Paris burning? And von Choltitz tells him, yes, my Fuhrer, we've burned the city.
Instead, he negotiates a surrender.
It is the officers and men of that 2nd French Armored Division who first enter Paris. So de Gaulle can claim that the French have liberated their own capital. And not just any old French, not the communist French, not the his French army.
He's the one leading the parade through the streets of Paris, presenting himself as the legitimate leader of the French government.
Everyone in the city has come out now because they feel that their moment of liberation is on them.
Paris, Paris outragé, Paris brisé, Paris martyrisé, mais Paris libéré.